What if the greatest exploration story of the ancient world has been hiding in plain sight, covered not by jungle or desert, but by 1,000 miles of crushing ice? Picture this: centuries before European explorers braved the Southern Ocean, before the first wooden ships carried telescopes and compasses into the unknown, there might have been others. Sailors from forgotten civilizations, steering by the stars alone, who glimpsed the impossible, a land where the sun barely rises, where mountains pierce glaciers taller than anything the ancient world had ever seen. Antarctica, the very idea seems unbelievable today. How could fragile wooden vessels survive those violent seas? How would crews endure months of darkness without modern supplies? And yet there are whispers in old maps, strange details in ancient texts, artifacts that don't quite fit the timeline we've been taught. These aren't just random anomalies, they're puzzle pieces scattered across history, waiting to be connected. Take the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513. A chart so shockingly accurate it shows Antarctica's coastline hundreds of years before the continent was officially discovered. But here's what chills historians. The map depicts landmasses free of ice, matching geological surveys of Antarctica as it would have looked 6,000 years ago. Where did that knowledge come from? Or consider the accounts of Polynesian sailors, whose oral traditions speak of a place so far south the ocean turns to stone. Could these be fractured memories of real voyages? The deeper you dig, the more the question shifts from "did they go?" to "how could they not have tried?" Humans have always pushed boundaries, crossing oceans, scaling mountains, chasing horizons. Why would the southern edge of the world be any different? This isn't just about rewriting history books, it's about rediscovering the audacity of our ancestors. Imagine standing on the deck of an ancient ship, waves crashing over the bow, your crew whispering prayers to gods we've forgotten, as a wall of ice taller than any temple rises on the horizon. What would that moment have felt like? Today, we'll sift through the evidence, cryptic ship logs, disputed artifacts, and the tantalizing possibility that someone, somewhere, left a record we haven't fully understood. Some clues point to the Phoenicians, master navigators who may have sailed further than we ever realized. Others suggest the Chinese treasure fleets of the Ming Dynasty could have ventured south in search of new trade routes. But the truth is, every theory raises new questions, and that's where the real adventure begins, because history's greatest mysteries aren't just about answers. They're about learning to ask better questions, so let's set sail into the unknown together and see where the currents of evidence take us. The Piri Reis map isn't just an old piece of parchment, it's a time capsule of lost knowledge, a riddle wrapped in ink and vellum. When you first lay eyes on it, the most shocking detail isn't the intricate coastlines of Africa or South America, but the jagged contours at the bottom of the page, a landmass that looks unmistakably like Antarctica. And here's what defies logic. This map was drawn in 1513, a full 300 years before humans officially set foot on the frozen continent. But Piri Reis himself left us a clue. In the margins, he wrote that his work was pieced together from far older sources, charts dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, and perhaps even earlier. Could these have been copies of maps from civilizations swallowed by time, cultures that sailed further than we ever imagined? Now, skeptics have their arguments. Some say the mysterious land is just a distorted version of South America, or a lucky guess by an ancient cartographer. But here's where things get eerie. Modern satellite surveys of Antarctica's subglacial topography reveal something astonishing. The Piri Reis map aligns with parts of the continent's coastline beneath the ice, as it would have appeared thousands of years ago before the glaciers swallowed it whole. That's not something you stumble upon by accident. It suggests knowledge, real, first-hand knowledge from an era when Antarctica might have been navigable. Who could have mapped it? The Phoenicians, those legendary seafarers who circled Africa 2,000 years before Vasco da Gama, or perhaps the Minoans, whose advanced ships ruled the Mediterranean long before the rise of Athens. Then there's the elephant in the room. Even if ancient sailors did reach Antarctica, how did their maps survive long enough to wind up in Piri Reis's hands? Think about it. Papyrus crumbles, wood rots, knowledge gets lost in wars, fires, the slow collapse of empires, and yet, somehow, these fragments endured, passed down like heirlooms through generations of scholars and sailors. It makes you wonder what else might be hiding in the archives of the world, waiting for the right person to connect the dots. This isn't just about a map. It's about the tenacity of human curiosity, the idea that exploration didn't begin with the age of discovery. It merely continued what others had started millennia before. And if that's true, then history's greatest adventures might still be waiting to be rediscovered. To grasp the true scale of what ancient sailors might have accomplished, we need to step aboard their ships, not the romanticized versions we see in movies, but the real, creaking vessels that dared the unknown. Take the Phoenicians, those shadowy masters of the Mediterranean. Their ships weren't just floating marketplaces. They were engineered for endurance with sturdy hulls of cedar planks sealed with tar, capable of weathering Atlantic swells. Some historians believe they circumnavigated Africa as early as 600 B.C., a voyage that would have thrust them into the roaring 40s, the same winds later used by European explorers to reach the Indian Ocean. If they could survive those southern latitudes, how much further might they have gone? Then there's the Polynesian double-hulled canoe, a marvel of pre-industrial engineering. These weren't fragile rafts but sophisticated vessels lashed together with miles of woven cordage, capable of carrying families, livestock, and supplies across thousands of miles of open ocean. Polynesian navigators didn't just follow the stars. They read the subtle language of the sea, the flight patterns of birds, the refraction of waves against distant islands, even the taste of the wind. Their oral histories speak of voyages to the subantarctic, places like Rapa Nui and the Chatham Islands, where the air turns bitter and the ocean churns with ice floes. If they could navigate to these edge-of-the-world outposts, could Antarctica have been an impossible leap, or just the next challenge in a millennia-long tradition of exploration? But let's not sugarcoat the obstacles. Antarctica isn't just another ocean crossing. It's a gauntlet of ice and despair. Ancient ships, no matter how well built, lacked insulated hulls or steam engines to power through pack ice. Crews would have faced hypothermia, scurvy, and the psychological horror of months without sunlight. And yet we underestimate our ancestors at our peril. The same Phoenicians who braved the Atlantic also mined tin in storm, lashed Britain, a journey that would have seemed suicidal to lesser sailors. The Norse settled Greenland during the medieval warm period, farming land that's now frozen tundra. Climate shifts might have opened temporary windows periods when sea ice receded, offering a narrow path south. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in the materials. Ancient shipwrights used what they had: wood, rope, and ingenuity. But recent experiments, like the reconstruction of the Greek trireme Olympias, proved these vessels could hit speeds matching modern sailboats. Could a fleet of such ships, stocked with seal hides for warmth and fermented fish for vitamin C, have survived a summer push into Antarctic waters? It's speculative, yes, but so was Thor Heyerdahl's Kon-Tiki expedition until he proved bamboo rafts could cross the Pacific. History has a way of humbling our assumptions. The real question isn't whether ancient sailors could have reached Antarctica, it's whether we've been looking for their footprints in the wrong places. After all, the ice never gives up its secrets easily. Long before Piri Reis put ink to parchment, Greek and Roman scholars were already whispering about lands that defied logic, places so far south they existed outside the known world. Take Pytheas, the Greek explorer from Massalia, whose 4th century B.C. writings describe a chilling sight, a frozen sea where the sun hovered low even at midday, and the water thickened into a slush that could trap ships. For centuries, historians dismissed this as a confused account of the Arctic. But what if Pytheas wasn't describing the North at all? Could his frozen sea have been the pack ice of the Southern Ocean, a phenomenon no Mediterranean sailor had ever witnessed? The details gnaw at the edges of plausibility. His reports of bizarre tides and endless summer twilight match eerie Antarctic conditions far better than the Baltic, where some claim he sailed. Then there's Tacitus, the Roman historian who chronicled his father-in-law's campaigns in Britain. In a passing remark, he mentions lands beyond the known world, terrae australes, where the climate grew so harsh it was uninhabitable. Most assume he meant Scandinavia, but the phrasing is vague, almost deliberate. Roman merchants traded as far as India. Their ships could have caught rumors from Arab or Malay sailors who'd ventured deeper south. Even Ptolemy's 2nd century maps hinted at a vast southern landmass, labeling it terra incognita. These weren't wild guesses. They were echoes, fragments of knowledge passed along trade routes like precious cargo. The debate hinges on a single, tantalizing question. How much did ancient cultures actually know? Some scholars argue these accounts are simply mislabeled descriptions of Iceland or Norway, twisted by time and translation. Others point to a startling pattern. Too many disparate sources, Greek, Roman, even later Arab geographers alluding to southern extremes that don't fit the geography of the North. The Greek concept of Antichthon, a counterbalanced continent in the far south, wasn't just myth. It was a philosophical deduction, a belief that the world's landmasses must balance across the equator. Could that theory have been rooted in real, half-remembered voyages? What's often overlooked is the sheer reach of ancient trade networks. A Roman coin found in Okinawa, Phoenician dinars in Brazil, these aren't anomalies. They're proof that the ancient world was far more connected than we assume. If goods and people could traverse such distances, why not knowledge? Imagine a Carthaginian ship blown off course, surviving weeks of storms only to sight glaciers under a pale sun. Even one such voyage, even one surviving logbook, could have seeded centuries of speculation. The ice preserves nothing, but stories have a way of outlasting stone. And that's the heart of the mystery. Not whether these accounts prove ancient Antarctic contact, but why we're so quick to dismiss the possibility that our ancestors were bolder, luckier, or simply more curious than we've ever given them credit for. The legend of Terra Australis lingers like a ghost in the margins of medieval maps, a sprawling southern continent sketched with such confidence, yet so utterly absent from reality. Or was it, for centuries, cartographers from Ptolemy to Mercator insisted this land had to exist, a counterweight to the northern hemisphere's land masses? They called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. But here's where the puzzle deepens. These weren't just wild guesses. Many of these maps included eerily specific details, coastlines with bays and capes, mountain ranges where none should have been known. How could mapmakers working by candlelight, centuries before the age of exploration, depict a continent no European had supposedly reached? One compelling theory points to the Arab traders who dominated the Indian Ocean as early as the 8th century. Their dhows, sleek vessels with triangular lateen sails, could have ventured far beyond the spice routes of Indonesia. Arab geographers like Al-Idrisi wrote of mysterious lands beyond the equator where the sea grows thick like curdled milk, a description chillingly reminiscent of Antarctic pack ice. Even more telling, a 9th century Persian manuscript mentions sailors who claim to have seen a land of eternal white after being blown off course near the Cape of Good Hope. Could these accounts have trickled north through trade networks, morphing into the terra australis of European maps? Then there's the Zeno map of 1558, a controversial chart showing a landmass called Estatiland near Greenland and another labeled Drogeo, suspiciously close to where Antarctica's peninsula would lie. The map's creator claimed it was based on voyages by the Zeno brothers of Venice in the late 14th century, 200 years before Magellan's circumnavigation. Skeptics dismiss it as fantasy, but others note something peculiar. The map's southern landmass aligns with the same ice-free coastline features seen in the Piri Reis map. That's either an astronomical coincidence or evidence that multiple cultures preserved fragments of the same lost knowledge. What makes Terra Australis so fascinating isn't just its presence on old parchment, but the psychology behind it. This wasn't mere cartographic filler. These maps reveal a pattern of insistence, a conviction that the South held something monumental. When James Cook finally crossed the Antarctic Circle in 1773, disproving Terra Australis as a temperate paradise, he nonetheless stumbled upon something far stranger, a frozen continent exactly where the old maps suggested land should be. That's the real mystery. If these ancient charts were pure myth, how did they get so much right by accident? Maybe the answer lies not in the maps themselves, but in the voices lost to time Phoenician merchants, Polynesian wayfinders, Arab astronomers, who whispered of lands beyond the ice long before the first European explorers claimed the glory of discovery. Admiral Zheng, his treasure fleets were the space shuttles of their day, vast armadas of wooden giants that made European caravels look like rowboats. At the height of the Ming Dynasty, these ships carried thousands of sailors, diplomats, and scholars across the Indian Ocean, their voyages meticulously recorded in scrolls that read like 15th century National Geographic. We know they reached East Africa, traded with Arab sultans, and even brought a giraffe back to the imperial court. But what if their ambition stretched further? Some researchers point to a curious detail in Zheng He's navigation charts, a series of star alignments that don't correspond to any known African or Asian coastline, but match celestial positions visible only deep in the southern hemisphere. The theory gains traction when you examine the ships themselves. These weren't fragile vessels. The largest junks in Zheng He's fleet stretched over 400 feet longer than a football field, with multiple decks, watertight bulkheads, and enough storage to sustain crews for months. They carried astronomical compasses that could pinpoint latitude by measuring the angle of Polaris, and their captains followed rutters, detailed sailing manuals with landmarks, currents, and star paths. If any ancient fleet had the technology to push beyond known waters, it was this one. Yet mainstream historians remain skeptical, and for good reason. The official records from Zheng He's voyages, the Mingxi, mention no icy landmasses or violent southern seas. Instead, they describe tropical ports, monsoon winds, and diplomatic exchanges. The star charts in question could simply be scribble errors, or perhaps theoretical calculations never tested at sea. And then there's the climate problem. Antarctica in the early 15th century was just as frozen and inhospitable as it is today. Without specialized hulls to break ice, even Zheng He's mighty junks would have struggled to approach the continent, let alone map it. But history has a way of surprising us. Take the case of the Canoe Wanguo Quantu, a 16th century world map created by Jesuit missionaries in China. Buried in its southern reaches is a landmass labeled Magellanica, a crude but recognizable outline of Antarctica. The Jesuits claimed it was based on European sources, but what if they'd also tapped into older Chinese knowledge? After all, Zheng He's voyages were abruptly halted in 1433 when the emperor banned oceanic exploration and countless records were destroyed. Could fragments of southern exploration have survived in secret, passed down through generations of navigators before resurfacing on maps like this? The enduring fascination with Zheng He and Antarctica speaks to a deeper truth. We're drawn to the idea of lost chapters. Whether his fleets glimpsed icy shores or not, their story reminds us how much history is written by the victors and how much might still be hiding in the margins. For every verified fact about ancient exploration, there are a dozen tantalizing maybes, and sometimes the maybes are where the real adventure lies. Among the waves of the Pacific, where the horizon stretches endlessly, Polynesian navigators charted courses that still baffle modern sailors. Their oral traditions are more than just stories, they're encrypted logbooks, passed down through generations in chants and star lore. Some of the most haunting accounts describe a place so far south the ocean itself seemed to die, its waters choked with floating mountains of white. The Maori of New Zealand spoke of Te Taiuka, a pier, the frozen sea where waves hardened like arrowroot paste. In the Cook Islands, legends tell of a voyager named Ui Tirangara, who around the year 650 is said to have sailed into waters so cold the air burned his lungs, where monstrous ice cliffs rose from the mist. These aren't vague myths, they're shockingly specific, detailing phenomena no tropical islander could have imagined, like the eerie blue glow of icebergs or the way pack ice groans under pressure, a sound unlike anything in Polynesia's warm lagoons. What makes these accounts so compelling is the Polynesians' track record. These were the greatest open ocean navigators in history, crossing thousands of miles without compasses or charts. Their double-hulled canoes, lashed together with miles of hand-woven cordage, could outmaneuver European ships in heavy seas. They navigated by reading the stars, the flight patterns of birds, even the subtle refraction of waves against unseen islands, a skill modern science has only recently begun to understand. In 2010, a crew reenacting ancient Polynesian voyages sailed a traditional canoe from Hawaii to Rapa Nui, proving these journeys weren't just possible but repeatable. If they could reach Easter Island's lonely shores, why not push further? The counter-arguments are strong, of course. No Polynesian artifacts have ever been found in Antarctica, no carvings in the ice or abandoned settlements. The oral traditions could describe encounters with subantarctic islands like the Snares or the Auckland Islands, where glaciers and icebergs are common. And the timeline doesn't quite align. Ui Tirangara's voyage predates even the earliest Polynesian settlement of New Zealand by centuries, but history is full of anomalies that later proved true. For decades, scholars dismissed Maori tales of a land of fire as myth until geological evidence confirmed their ancestors had witnessed volcanic eruptions in New Zealand's Taupo region. Could the ice legends be another case of dismissed truth? Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in the Kumara. This sweet potato, native to South America, somehow reached Polynesia centuries before Europeans crossed the Pacific. Genetic evidence suggests it was brought back by Polynesian voyagers who'd reached the Andes a round trip of over 8,000 miles. If they could accomplish that, who's to say some rogue wave, some curious captain, didn't push further? Picture this: a storm blows a canoe off course, the crew surviving on stored rainwater and fish until the currents drag them south. They'd have no concept of ice, no words for glaciers, just the visceral shock of a world turned inside out, where water could shatter like glass. Even one such voyage, even one survivor's tale, could have seeded legends lasting millennia. The silence of archaeology isn't proof against possibility. Polynesian canoes were built from organic materials that vanish in centuries. Antarctica's grinding ice would have obliterated any temporary camps. What remains are the stories, fragile, mutable, but persistent. They force us to ask uncomfortable questions. How much of history's speculation is just us underestimating the past? And if even a fraction of these legends are rooted in real events, what other impossible journeys might our ancestors have taken, their secrets lost to the tides of time? The Inca Empire stretched across some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth, from the sweltering coasts of Peru to the thin-aired peaks of the Andes. They built suspension bridges from woven grass, moved multi-ton stones without wheels, and engineered terraces that still cling to mountainsides centuries later. If any pre-Columbian culture had the ingenuity to push boundaries, it was them. Along Peru's coast, archaeologists have found remnants of balsa wood rafts fitted with sails, vessels capable of carrying tons of cargo along trade routes that may have stretched as far as Central America. But could those same boats have ventured into the unknown waters of the far south? There's a curious pattern in Inca mythology that hints at something deeper. Their creation stories speak of Viracocha, a bearded god who arrived from the sea, dressed in strange robes, and brought knowledge before vanishing westward across the waves. Some researchers suggest this could be a distorted memory of contact with Polynesian sailors, or even a much older seafaring culture. More tantalizing are the quippers, the Inca's knotted string accounting system. A handful of these artifacts have been found with unusual cords tied in patterns resembling ocean currents or star paths. Could they have been navigational records, a maritime code we've yet to crack? Then there's the coastal evidence. The Chincha people, subjects of the Inca, were master traders who sailed as far as Ecuador, their rafts laden with spondylus shells, sacred objects traded like currency. Shell middens and anchor stones litter Peru's shoreline, proof of bustling maritime activity. But here's where the trail goes cold. No pre-Columbian artifacts have ever surfaced in Antarctica, no distinctive pottery shards or bronze tools frozen in the ice. The Southern Ocean's violent swells and the lack of nearby landfalls would have made return voyages nearly impossible. Even if an Inca raft was blown off course, survival in those frigid waters without insulation or metal tools seems unimaginable. Yet absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Consider the sweet potato, a crop native to South America that somehow reached Polynesia centuries before Columbus. If plants could cross oceans, why not people? The Humboldt Current, a cold river in the sea flowing north along Chile's coast, could have acted as a natural highway southward for any vessel daring enough to follow it. And let's not forget the climatic wildcard, the medieval warm period, a time from roughly 900 to 1300 AD when global temperatures rose. Could a temporary retreat of Antarctic sea ice have opened a narrow window for exploration? The most compelling argument isn't physical, it's psychological. The Inca weren't just engineers, they were inveterate record keepers, chronicling everything from crop yields to astronomical events. If even a single raft had returned with tales of a frozen land, wouldn't that have been worth preserving? Unless, of course, those who sailed south never came back. That's the haunting possibility lurking beneath this theory. Antarctica doesn't give up its secrets lightly. It swallows ships whole, erases footprints under blizzards, and preserves nothing but ice. Maybe the real question isn't whether the Inca reached Antarctica, but whether we'd ever know if they did. What lingers is the broader lesson. History is written by those who return. For every Magellan or Cook celebrated in textbooks, how many nameless sailors vanished into the white silence of the South, their stories lost to time. The Inca may not have left proof of Antarctic voyages, but their maritime legacy, those fragile balsa rafts conquering Pacific currents, reminds us that the past was far more daring than we often assume. And sometimes the most tantalizing mysteries aren't the ones we can solve, but the ones that force us to reimagine what's possible. The Norse sagas paint vivid pictures of icy shores and frozen sea stories of Eric the Red's exile to Greenland, or Leif Erikson's accidental discovery of Vinland. These tales are etched into history, proof that medieval Europeans could cross the North Atlantic in open longboats. But beyond these confirmed voyages, the sagas whisper of something stranger, lands even further west, places where the ice never melted, where the sun hung low in the sky year-round. Historians dismiss these as embellishments or misidentifications of known locations like Baffin Island. Yet the question lingers, could Norse explorers, or perhaps other forgotten European sailors, have pushed further south into waters no one believed they could reach? Consider the sheer audacity of Norse navigation. Their longships weren't just coastal cruisers, they were ocean-going vessels capable of surviving weeks in open water. Sailors steered by the sunstone, a crystal that could polarize sunlight even through dense cloud cover, and read wave patterns like a roadmap. In 1976, a replica Viking ship sailed from Norway to Newfoundland using only medieval techniques, proving these journeys weren't just possible but repeatable. If they could cross the Atlantic, why not ride the currents further? The East Greenland Current, for instance, flows southward along the coast, a natural conveyor belt that could have carried a storm-blown ship into uncharted waters. Then there's the mystery of the Hvitserk saga. This obscure Icelandic text mentions a ship lost in a storm, only to return years later with tales of a land where mountains of glass rose from the sea. Most scholars assume this refers to icebergs off Greenland's coast, but Antarctic icebergs dwarf anything in the Arctic. Some stretch dozens of miles long, with cliffs towering hundreds of feet high. Could a wayward Norse crew, driven far off course, have glimpsed the fringes of the southern ice? The timing is plausible. The medieval warm period, from roughly 900 to 1300 AD, saw temperatures rise enough to temporarily shrink Arctic sea ice, potentially opening new routes. Of course, the lack of physical evidence is glaring. No Norse artifacts have ever turned up in Antarctica, no rune stones or iron nails buried in the permafrost. The Southern Ocean's violent storms and lack of landfalls would have made a return voyage nearly impossible. And yet, absence of proof isn't proof of absence. The Norse settlements in Greenland vanished almost without a trace, their records lost to time. If entire colonies could disappear from history, why not a single exploratory voyage? The deeper you dig, the more you realize how much we still don't know about medieval maritime capability. Take the Basque whalers of the 15th century, who hunted as far as the Grand Banks of Newfoundland decades before Columbus. Their records are fragmentary, but their ships were sturdy, built to withstand icy waters. Or the enigmatic Zeno map of 1558, which claims to depict 14th century Venetian voyages to a land called Drogeo, a place some theorists argue could be Antarctica's peninsula. These threads are tenuous, yes, but they weave a pattern of possibility. What's often overlooked is the human factor. Exploration wasn't just about technology. It was about desperation, curiosity, or sheer luck. A fishing boat blown off course, a merchant vessel fleeing pirates' history is full of accidental discoveries. Antarctica's coastline is littered with the wrecks of 19th century ships, many crushed by ice just miles from shore. If seasoned captains with steel-hulled ships could misjudge those waters, imagine the fate of a medieval crew in a wooden longship. The truth may lie somewhere between skepticism and wonder. While no concrete evidence ties medieval Europeans to Antarctica, their seafaring achievements defy easy dismissal. Perhaps the real lesson isn't whether they reached the southern ice, but how close they might have come, and how much history remains hidden beneath the waves. After all, the past never gives up its secrets all at once. It waits for us to ask the right questions. The Bewatch map doesn't just challenge our understanding of history, it taunts us with its precision. Published in 1737 by French geographer Philippe Bewatch, this peculiar chart depicts a landmass eerily similar to Antarctica, yet split by a wide channel separating it into two distinct continents. Here's where things get strange. This map predates the official discovery of the continent by nearly a century. Bewatch himself claimed his work was based on hypothetical geography, piecing together fragments from older, lost sources. But the details are too uncanny to dismiss mountain ranges, rivers, and coastlines that align suspiciously well with modern satellite surveys of the subglacial terrain. How could a theoretical map from the 18th century mirror features buried under miles of ice, features we've only confirmed with 20th century technology? Skeptics have their explanations. Bewatch was a respected academic, a pioneer of contour lines and elevation mapping. Some argue he simply made an educated guess, extrapolating from the growing belief in terra australis, the mythical southern continent scholars had speculated about since antiquity. Others point out that his map includes glaring errors, like a vast inland sea where none exists. But here's the twist: recent ice-penetrating radar has revealed something astonishing. Beneath East Antarctica's ice sheet lies a network of ancient river valleys and basins, remnants of a time when the continent was warmer. Bewatch's Inland Sea aligns almost perfectly with one of these basins, a detail no one in the 1700s could have fabricated. The debate boils down to a single, haunting possibility. Was Bewatch working from genuine sources? Ancient Greek texts speak of a sailor named Pythias who ventured beyond the Mediterranean into frozen seas. Phoenician traders might have circled Africa long before recorded history. Could fragments of their knowledge, maps copied and recopied until the originals crumbled, have survived in some forgotten archive, only to resurface in Bewatch's hands? It wouldn't be the first time. The Piri Reis map, drawn centuries earlier, also claims to synthesize ancient charts, some dating back to Alexander the Great's library. Yet the silence of archaeology is deafening. If advanced seafaring cultures had mapped Antarctica thousands of years ago, where are the shipwrecks, the tools, the physical proof? Maybe the answer lies in the ice itself. Antarctica's glaciers are relentless, grinding stone to powder and swallowing entire landscapes. A wooden ship, a temporary camp, these wouldn't stand a chance over millennia. What survives are the stories, the maps, the stubborn whispers that refuse to fade. The Bewatch map forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. History isn't a tidy ledger of facts. It's a palimpsest, layers of knowledge scribbled over and erased, where even the wildest theories might contain a grain of truth. Whether Bewatch's work was genius, luck, or something far older, it reminds us that the past is always more mysterious than we dare admit. And sometimes the most compelling evidence isn't what we find, but what we can't explain. Today's Antarctica is a frozen fortress, its coastline guarded by towering cliffs of ice and storms that can sink modern steel ships. But rewind the clock 6,000 years and the scene shifts dramatically. Geological cores drilled from the ocean floor tell a startling story. During the mid-Holocene warm period, Antarctica's edges were far more accessible. Summer temperatures along the peninsula might have reached highs of 7 or even 10 degrees Celsius, cold by our standards, but survivable for well-prepared explorers. Satellite surveys reveal something even more intriguing. Ancient river channels and lake beds now buried under miles of ice, proof that parts of the continent once knew liquid water. If ancient sailors had approached during this window, they wouldn't have faced the impenetrable wall of ice we see today. Instead, they might have encountered sheltered bays, ice-free headlands, even stretches of tundra where hardy plants clung to life. The question isn't just whether Antarctica was reachable, it's whether anyone was there to see it. Take the case of the Larsen Ice Shelf. In 2002, this Rhode Island-sized slab of ice abruptly disintegrated, revealing a hidden coastline that hadn't seen sunlight for at least 12,000 years. But here's the catch: when scientists examined the newly exposed rock, they found something unexpected. Layers of sediment suggested periodic ice retreats, moments when the shelf had partially melted before refreezing. These fluctuations align with climate cycles known as Holocene thermal maxima, brief warm spells that occurred roughly every 2,000 years. The most recent one coincided with the height of Phoenician and Polynesian seafaring. Could a ship venturing south during such a window have glimpsed these temporary inroads? Critics argue that even during warm periods, Antarctica's climate would have been brutal by ancient standards. The peninsula might have been ice-free in summer, but winter still brought months of darkness and temperatures plunging far below freezing. No Bronze Age ship carried the insulation or food stores needed to endure such conditions. Yet this overlooks a key factor: ancient sailors didn't need to overwinter. The same Polynesians who crossed thousands of miles of open ocean did so in deliberate hops, timing voyages to favorable seasons. A summer expedition skirting Antarctica's northern edges, staying close enough to spot glaciers but far enough to avoid pack ice, might have been survivable with careful planning. The strongest evidence comes from an unlikely source: sea levels. During the last ice age, so much water was locked in glaciers that global sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than today. As the ice melted, coastlines changed dramatically. Some scholars propose that early maritime cultures might have mapped now submerged lands, passing down these charts through generations. The Piri Reis map's controversial depiction of Antarctica could reflect this: a snapshot of the continent's coastline as it appeared during a much earlier, warmer era, preserved in copies of copies until it reached Ottoman hands. What's often missing from this debate is the human element. We focus so much on whether ancient ships could have survived Antarctic waters that we forget to ask whether they would have tried. History is littered with examples of cultures taking unimaginable risks for resources, knowledge, or sheer curiosity. The Norse settled Greenland during the medieval warm period, a land barely more hospitable than Antarctica's fringes. The Lapita people crossed the vast Pacific in canoes, chasing rumors of new islands. Given these precedents, is it really so far-fetched to think someone, somewhere, might have pushed just a little further south? The ice complicates everything. It erases evidence, swallows wreckage, and distorts memory. Even if ancient sailors did glimpse Antarctica's shores during a warm spell, their stories would have morphed into legend over centuries: tales of lands where water turned to stone, or where mountains glittered like glass. What remains are the geological clues, the maps that shouldn't exist, and the nagging sense that our understanding of the past is still full of holes. Antarctica's deepest secrets may not be hidden in the ice at all, but in the gaps between what we think we know and what might have been. The brutal truth about Antarctica is that it doesn't just guard its secrets, it annihilates them. Imagine a wooden ship, no matter how sturdily built, surviving the Southern Ocean's fury only to meet the continent's grinding glaciers. Within decades, the hull would be crushed to splinters, scattered across the seafloor by relentless currents. Within centuries, even iron nails would corrode into dust, leaving no trace. This is the nightmare of Antarctic archaeology, a place where time and ice conspire to erase history. But absence of evidence isn't always evidence of absence. Consider the case of Endurance, Ernest Shackleton's legendary ship lost in 1915. It took a century of searching with sonar and underwater drones to finally locate its wreck in 2022, and that was with precise coordinates from survivor accounts. Now imagine trying to find a vessel from 2,000 years ago with no records, no names, just whispers in crumbling texts, yet there's a glimmer of hope beneath the waves. Recent advances in subglacial sonar have revealed something startling. Antarctica's coastline wasn't always buried. During warmer periods, sea levels fluctuated dramatically, exposing shelves now submerged under hundreds of feet of water. These drowned landscapes could hold clues, not ships perhaps, but campsites, tools, or even carvings left by crews who hauled their vessels onto temporary shores. The Thwaites Glacier, nicknamed the Doomsday Glacier for its rapid melting, has already exposed pockets of ancient seabed previously locked in ice. If ancient sailors did land here, their footprints wouldn't be on the surface. They'd be out at sea, waiting to be rediscovered. The challenge isn't just technical, it's geological. Antarctica's ice doesn't sit still. Rivers of frozen water, some moving a kilometer per year, drag everything in their path, rocks, debris, even entire meteorites into the ocean. A campsite from Roman times could have been pulverized and dumped miles offshore long before humans invented writing. And let's not forget the most destructive force of all, icebergs. These floating mountains calve off glaciers with the force of atomic bombs, scouring the seabed clean. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack if the haystack was constantly being bulldozed. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Some of the best evidence might not be in Antarctica at all. Take the Bayonnaise wreck off the coast of Japan. Discovered in 1850, this sunken vessel carried Ming Dynasty porcelain alongside Venetian glass, a proof that medieval trade routes spanned further than anyone thought. If ships from opposite ends of the globe could meet in the Pacific, why not the Southern Ocean? The key might lie in shipbuilding techniques. Phoenician hulls sealed with bitumen could resist rot for centuries underwater. Polynesian canoes lashed with coconut fiber left distinctive rope patterns in coral growth. Even if Antarctic ice destroyed the wood, these subtle signatures might survive in deeper, colder waters where decay slows to a crawl. The real breakthrough could come from an unlikely source, sediment cores. When glaciers grind over rock, they leave behind microscopic traces of minerals, unique fingerprints that reveal where the ice has been. Scientists drilling into Antarctic seabeds have already found volcanic ash from eruptions in South America and Africa, carried by winds thousands of years ago. If ancient ships traded goods across these distances, their ballast stones or cargo residues might linger in the same layers. It's a long shot, but so was finding the Titanic. What's often overlooked is the human factor. Shipwrecks aren't just about lost vessels, they're about lost stories. The Polynesians who navigated by jellyfish bioluminescence, the Phoenicians who marked stars on bronze tablets, the Inca who tied knots to record tides. These cultures didn't just sail, they observed, recorded, and passed down knowledge in ways we're still deciphering. Antarctica's greatest tragedy isn't the lack of physical evidence. It's that ice preserves things, but not voices. Every wreck we can't find, every camp swallowed by glaciers, takes with it a chapter of human courage we'll never get back. So while the skeptics aren't wrong, there's no smoking gun, no frozen ship emerging from the glaciers. They might be asking the wrong question. Instead of, where are the wrecks? Perhaps we should ask, where haven't we looked yet? The ocean floor is vast and technology is catching up. Every year, new tools like autonomous underwater drones and AI-powered sonar mapping bring us closer to seeing through the ice's blur. Until then, the silence of Antarctica isn't proof of emptiness. It's an invitation to listen harder. The idea of ancient astronauts or hyper-advanced lost civilizations guiding early Antarctic exploration makes for thrilling science fiction, but does it hold up under scrutiny? Proponents of these theories often point to the same enigmatic maps and artifacts we've discussed, arguing their precision defies the technological limits of their time. Take the Piri Reis map again. Its depiction of Antarctica's ice-free coastline has led some to suggest extraterrestrial cartographers or survivors from Atlantis supplied the knowledge. There's even a fringe hypothesis that Antarctica itself was once home to a prehistoric super-civilization, their cities now entombed beneath millennia of glaciers. These stories tap into something primal, the allure of hidden truths, of grand conspiracies rewriting history. But let's pause for reality. While the mysteries of ancient exploration are real, invoking aliens or Atlantis doesn't solve them. It merely replaces one enigma with another. Scholars note that every impossible detail in controversial maps like Piri Reis's has a plausible human explanation. Coastal contours could reflect educated guesses based on Greek geometry or composite accounts from multiple voyages. The Bewatch map's accurate features, they align just as well with lucky speculation about Terra Australis as they do with lost knowledge. As for Atlantis, Plato's original account describes a naval power beyond the Pillars of Hercules, likely a metaphor for hubris, not a literal Antarctic metropolis. The deeper problem with these theories isn't just their lack of evidence, it's how they diminish genuine human achievement. The Polynesians who navigated by starlight, the Phoenicians who braved the Atlantic in cedar ships, these weren't primitive people waiting for alien handouts. They were innovators whose skills were still unraveling. When we credit their accomplishments to outside forces, we erase their ingenuity. Consider how quickly we dismissed the possibility of Polynesians reaching South America until sweet potato genetics proved it. Or how Viking sagas were once labeled pure myth until Eland's Ox Meadows confirmed their voyages. History keeps reminding us our ancestors were far more capable than we assume. That's not to say all alternative theories lack merit. Graham Hancock's work on prehistoric civilizations, for instance, raises legitimate questions about how knowledge could have survived cataclysms like the Younger Dryas impact. But even he distances himself from the ancient astronaut crowd, focusing instead on plausible catastrophes that might have reset human progress. The difference lies in evidence. While Hancock cites geological data and archaeological anomalies, alien theories rely on speculative leaps like interpreting cave paintings as spacesuits or ice formations as pyramids. What's often lost in these debates is the real wonder of ancient exploration. You don't need aliens to explain why a Phoenician ship might have ventured south. They were traders, and traders go where the goods are. Could rumors of Antarctic sealskins or unusual minerals have drawn them? Absolutely. The same goes for the Ming treasure fleets. Zheng He's missions were about prestige and resources. If even one junk spotted distant glaciers, that sighting could have entered navigational lore without requiring interstellar visitors. The fascination with extraterrestrials and lost worlds speaks to a deeper hunger for mysteries that defy conventional timelines, for secrets lurking at history's edges. But Antarctica's true story might be more extraordinary precisely because it's human. Imagine a Bronze Age ship, sails patched with animal hides, creeping past icebergs under a pallid sun. No ray guns, no crystal cities, just raw courage and curiosity against the indifferent ice. That's a tale worth telling, not because it's easy to believe, but because it reminds us how much of our past is still waiting to be found. And sometimes the most radical idea isn't that aliens walked among us, but that we've always been far more remarkable than we knew. Mainstream skepticism isn't just about dismissing wild theories. It's a vital counterbalance to ensure history stays grounded in evidence. When experts scrutinize claims of ancient Antarctic contact, they're not trying to stifle curiosity. They're upholding a simple standard. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof. Take the Piri Reis map's so-called Antarctica. Critics note its coastline suspiciously mirrors the eastern edge of South America, rotated and distorted, a common error when piecing together fragmented sources. Without latitude markings or scale, it's impossible to confirm if that jagged landmass was ever intended to represent the southern continent at all. Even the ice-free coastline could simply depict Patagonia's rugged fjords, misinterpreted over centuries of copying. Then there's the silence of archaeology. For every enigmatic artifact like the Piri Reis map, there are countless mundane records, ship manifests, tax receipts, cargo lists, that detail ancient trade networks down to the last amphora of olive oil. If Phoenician or Ming fleets had reached Antarctica, wouldn't at least one scribe have noted the expense of such an expedition? The Inca kept meticulous quipu records of llama herds. Surely a voyage to a land of eternal white would have warranted a knot or two. Yet no known chronicle from any civilization explicitly describes Antarctic exploration. Climate science deals another blow. While Antarctica's ice sheets have fluctuated, its coastline hasn't been reliably ice-free since at least the last glacial maximum over 10,000 years before the rise of seafaring cultures. Even during warmer periods like the Roman climatic optimum, summer ice would have blocked all but the most determined ships, and surviving such a voyage. The Polynesians, master navigators though they were, relied on tropical winds and predictable currents. The Southern Ocean's chaotic storms and lack of stopovers would have been a death sentence for any canoe. But the most compelling rebuttal lies in human psychology. We're pattern-seeking creatures wired to connect dots even when they're not there. The same impulse that lets us see faces in clouds can convince us that vague map contours must be Antarctica. Historians call this the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, painting a target around random bullet holes and calling it a bullseye. When Bewatch's map aligns with subglacial topography in one spot but wildly misses in another, that's not evidence, it's coincidence. This isn't to say mysteries don't exist. The past is full of gaps and some may never be filled. But before we rewrite history with tales of ancient Antarctic voyages, we owe it to those same intrepid ancestors to demand more than just whispers and maybes. After all, the truth is often stranger and more human than any fiction. Surviving Antarctica's fury isn't just about having a sturdy ship. It's a logistical nightmare that would have pushed ancient sailors to the brink of human endurance. Picture a wooden vessel lashed by waves taller than its mast, navigating through fog so thick the stars vanish for weeks. Now add icebergs materializing like ghosts out of the mist, their submerged bulk capable of gutting a hull in seconds. The Southern Ocean isn't just rough, it's a gauntlet of 100-mile-per-hour katabatic winds screaming off the ice sheet, waves that can top 60 feet, and storms that linger for months. Even modern icebreakers with steel hulls and satellite forecasts respect these waters. For an ancient crew, it wouldn't be a voyage, it would be a lottery with survival as the jackpot. Then there's the cold. Antarctica's coastal temperatures rarely climb above freezing, even in summer. Hypothermia would have been a constant threat for sailors used to Mediterranean or Polynesian climates. Without insulated clothing, frostbite could turn a simple rope adjustment into a death sentence. And what about food? A ship stocked with grain and dried fish might last months in temperate zones, but caloric needs skyrocket in extreme cold. The Norse, who settled Greenland's icy fringes, relied on seal blubber and whale meat to stave off starvation, resources unavailable to a ship trapped in pack ice. Scurvy, the silent killer of long voyages, would have loomed large without fresh produce or the knowledge to prevent it. Isolation magnifies every risk. In the Mediterranean or the Pacific, a storm-blown ship might stumble upon an island or coastal village, but Antarctica offers no safe harbors, no friendly ports, no chance of rescue. A broken mast or a leaking hull wouldn't just delay the journey, it would strand the crew in a frozen desert with no hope of repair. The psychological toll would be devastating. Months of perpetual twilight, the groaning of ice pressing against the ship, the gnawing certainty that no one knew where you were, these are conditions that break even seasoned explorers. Shackleton's men, armed with wool coats and canned pemmican, nearly succumbed to madness during their infamous endurance ordeal. How could a Bronze Age crew, armed with nothing but animal skin sails and copper tools, have fared any better? Yet history whispers of exceptions. The Inuit thrived in the Arctic with nothing but bone harpoons and seal gut parkas. The Polynesians crossed thousands of miles of open ocean in canoes, their navigators memorizing wave patterns like a language. These cultures didn't just survive extremes, they mastered them. Could some lost civilization have developed equally ingenious solutions for the South? Perhaps, but Antarctica is a different beast. The Arctic at least offers seals, migratory birds, and summer thaws. Antarctica's coastline is a sterile wasteland for most of the year, its waters devoid of the fish stocks that sustained other polar cultures. The greatest barrier might not have been the ice or the cold, but time. Even if a ship miraculously reached Antarctica, how long could it stay without the ability to overwinter? A skill the Norse only managed in Greenland thanks to centuries of trial and error. Any landing would have been a fleeting glimpse, not a sustained exploration. And therein lies the cruelest twist. The very conditions that might have made Antarctica accessible during warm periods would have also erased the evidence. Temporary camps marking stones, even shipwrecks, all would have been pulverized by glaciers or drowned by rising seas. So where does that leave us? Not with a definitive no, but with a humbling realization. The past was far more fragile than we think. Every voyage that failed, every ship that vanished without a trace, takes its secrets to the deep. Antarctica's silence isn't proof that no one came, just that the ice never lets go of what it takes. What drives human beings to sail off the edge of the known world? For modern explorers, it's often about glory or scientific discovery. But ancient civilizations operated on a different calculus, one where risk had to balance against tangible rewards. The idea that Phoenician traders or Polynesian navigators might have braved Antarctic waters isn't just a question of capability, it's a puzzle of motivation. What could possibly lure them south into a realm of ice and darkness? Trade is the most obvious answer. The ancient world ran on luxuries, spices, metals, rare materials that could make kings rich and cities powerful. The Phoenicians circled Africa for tin, a metal crucial for bronze. The Romans sailed to India for pepper, paying in gold by the pound. If rumors reached Carthage or Alexandria of some unimaginable resource in the far south, whale oil, seal pelts, or even mythical substances like white gold, ivory, wouldn't someone have gambled on a voyage? Consider the lengths cultures went to for mythic commodities. The Silk Road crossed deserts and mountains for Chinese silk. Maldivian cowrie shells wound up in West African kingdoms. The incentive didn't need to be rational, just irresistible. Then there's the survival angle. The Rapa Nui of Easter Island didn't set out to colonize the most remote island on Earth. They were likely driven by overpopulation or dwindling resources back home. The Norse expansion to Greenland and Vinland followed a similar pattern, pushing boundaries when homelands grew crowded. Could climate shifts have forced ancient mariners south? The Thera eruption in 1600 BC triggered tsunamis and famine across the Mediterranean. The collapse of the Minoan civilization sent refugees sailing in all directions. Desperation can make even the most perilous journey seem survivable, but the most intriguing motivator might be the simplest: curiosity. Humans have never been content with boundaries. The Lapita people didn't island hop across the Pacific because they needed more land. They went because it was there. The same impulse that sent Magellan circling the globe or drove Shackleton to the South Pole likely burned in ancient hearts. Polynesian oral traditions are full of explorers like Hui T. Rangara, who sailed into icy waters just to see. The Phoenicians, masters of secrecy, might have kept such voyages quiet to protect trade routes. After all, if you discovered a new land, why tell your competitors? Religion adds another layer. Ancient cultures often tied geography to cosmology. The Egyptians believed the underworld lay west beyond the sunset. The Norse thought the northern lights were armor of the Valkyries. Could Antarctica have been woven into some lost belief system, a land of ancestors, gods, or primordial chaos? The Greek concept of antipodes, a counterbalance continent, wasn't just map-making. It reflected philosophical ideas about symmetry in nature. If a culture believed divinity resided in the south, wouldn't they seek it? Yet skeptics rightly point out the absence of smoking guns. No ancient texts explicitly mention Antarctic resources or sacred southern lands. No cargo holds have yielded exotic goods traceable to the frozen continent. But absence isn't always negation. The spice trade between Rome and India was once considered exaggeration until archaeologists found Roman coins in Tamil Nadu. The Viking presence in North America was myth until Eland's Ox Meadows. History has a way of surprising us. The truth may lie in fragmented motives. A storm-blown ship surviving against all odds, a trader chasing rumors, a priest seeking visions in the ice. Antarctica's allure isn't just about whether ancient people could reach it, but why they might have tried. And in that question lingers a deeper mystery. How much of human daring has been lost because no one survived to tell the tale? The Norse sagas tell of Leif Erikson's voyage to Vinland around the year 1000, a journey that stretched across the stormy North Atlantic to the shores of what we now call Newfoundland. It's a staggering feat, wooden longships braving icy waters, navigating by sunstones and gut instinct. But as impressive as that was, the North Atlantic offered something Antarctica never could: pit stops. Greenland, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, these were waypoints where crews could restock, repair, and even overwinter if needed. Antarctica, by contrast, is a void. No sheltered coves, no foraging opportunities, just an unbroken expanse of howling wind and shifting ice. The Norse could follow the migratory paths of seals and birds. Antarctic voyagers would have faced a food desert, where even the hardiest seabirds vanish for months. Then there's the Polynesian expansion, arguably the greatest maritime achievement in human history. Starting from Taiwan around 3,000 years ago, these voyagers crossed thousands of miles of open ocean to settle every habitable island in the Pacific. Their double-hulled canoes, guided by stars and swells, reached as far as Easter Island's lonely shores, a speck of land smaller than Manhattan. isolated by 2,000 miles of empty ocean. But here's the critical difference: the Pacific, for all its vastness, is warm. A storm-blown Polynesian canoe might drift for weeks, but survivors could catch fish, collect rainwater, and even fashion new sails from pandanus leaves. In the Southern Ocean, a stranded crew would freeze within hours. The Polynesians mastered currents like the Pacific's Great Conveyor Belt, which sweeps predictably from Asia to the Americas. Antarctica, though, is ringed by the ACC, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, a relentless, clockwise maelstrom with no easy exits. Once you're in its grip, escape requires luck bordering on divine intervention. Even the most audacious ancient voyages had fallback options. Phoenician traders circumnavigating Africa could hug the coastline, pulling ashore to mend sails or trade for supplies. The Ming treasure fleets, colossal as they were, followed well-established monsoon winds between known ports, but Antarctica's isolation is absolute. Its nearest habitable landmass, the tip of South America, lies over 600 miles away across the Drake Passage, some of the most violent waters on the planet. To put that in perspective, the Norse crossing from Norway to Iceland spanned about 650 miles, but they did it in stages, hopping via the Shetland and Faroe Islands. Antarctica offers no such stepping stones. The real divide isn't just distance or cold, it's time. The Polynesian settlement of Rapa Nui might have taken generations, with each voyage pushing incrementally further east. The Norse explored Vinland over decades, retreating when conditions turned hostile. But Antarctica doesn't allow for trial and error. There's no soft colonization, no chance to scout summers and retreat winters. The margin for error is zero. A single storm, one misjudged iceberg, and the entire expedition vanishes without a trace. That's what makes the idea of ancient Antarctic contact so tantalizing and so improbable. Other voyages expanded the edges of the known world. Antarctica would have been a leap into the unimaginable. Yet improbability isn't impossibility. History is littered with outliers: the Polynesian voyage that fetched sweet potatoes from South America, the Basque whalers who hunted cod off Newfoundland centuries before Columbus. Maybe, just maybe, some storm-tossed ship glimpsed Antarctica's glaciers under a pallid sun, its crew too frozen or frightened to press further. We'll likely never know for certain. But that's the heart of exploration, not just the journeys we can prove, but the ones that live on as whispers in the wind. Stories passed down through generations carry the weight of time, bending and shifting like waves reshaping a coastline. Oral traditions from ancient cultures often blur the line between history and myth, transforming real events into symbolic tales. The Maori speak of Uaiterangara's voyage into frozen seas. The Greeks recounted Pythias's journey to a slush-filled ocean, vivid descriptions that could easily describe subpolar regions much closer to home. Norway's fjords or Patagonia's glaciers might have inspired these accounts, their icy grandeur exaggerated over centuries of retelling. Without written records or physical proof, connecting these fragments directly to Antarctica is like trying to reconstruct a shipwreck from scattered driftwood. Consider how memory works. A Polynesian navigator describing pack ice to islanders who'd never seen frost might liken it to solidified waves or stone floating on water. By the 10th retelling, that metaphor could evolve into a legendary sea of stone in a land of eternal winter. The Inuit tale of Sedna, a goddess whose fingers became seals and whales, might explain marine life cycles to one listener, but to a Victorian ethnographer centuries later, it could be misread as a cryptic reference to Antarctic wildlife. Oral histories aren't lies, they're cultural fingerprints, revealing more about the people who shaped them than the events they describe. Yet dismissing them entirely would be a mistake. The Kerguelen Islands, halfway between Africa and Antarctica, were known to Arab traders as the Islands of the Damned for their brutal winds, a description later sailors confirmed when they rediscovered them in the 18th century. Similarly, Yupik stories from Alaska accurately recount the eruption of the Bering Land Bridge thousands of years before geologists confirmed it. The problem isn't that oral traditions are unreliable, it's that they require cultural context to decode. A Norse skald singing of glass mountains might mean Iceland's glaciers, not Antarctica's bergs. The real challenge is separating poetic license from geological fact. Take the Tupi-Guarani people of Brazil, whose flood myths align with rising sea levels after the last ice age, proof that oral histories can preserve astonishingly accurate details. But when the same story mentions a white desert beyond the horizon, is that Antarctica, the Andes, or pure allegory? Without corroboration, we're left with Rorschach tests in narrative form. Even the most detailed legends, like the Zeno Maps account of 14th century Venetian sailors encountering a land where fire and ice battle, could describe Iceland's volcanoes as easily as Antarctica's geothermal vents. What oral traditions offer isn't coordinates or confirmations, but possibilities. They remind us that ancient peoples observed their world with sharp eyes and passed down what mattered, sometimes literally, sometimes symbolically. The difference between a sailor's tall tale and a survival guide often depended on who was listening. So while these stories might not prove Antarctic contact, they keep the door ajar for wonder. After all, every enduring legend holds a grain of truth. We just have to learn how to sift for it. The year 1820 marked a turning point in humanity's relationship with the southern ice, the moment when Russian explorer Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen officially laid eyes on Antarctica's frozen shores. This discovery was celebrated as a triumph of the Enlightenment, the final frontier of terrestrial exploration finally yielding to scientific progress. But beneath the fanfare, something peculiar lingered. The maps carried by Bellingshausen and his contemporaries, the very tools that guided them south, contained traces of a puzzle no one could quite explain. Crude outlines of a southern landmass had appeared on charts for centuries, some eerily resembling the continent now being surveyed. How could cartographers have sketched a place no European was supposed to know existed? The 19th century's great Antarctic expeditions Ross, Wilkes, Dumont d'Urville faced conditions that would have been unthinkable to ancient sailors. Steel-hulled ships with reinforced bows still buckled under the pressure of pack ice. Crews bundled in wool and leather succumbed to frostbite within hours. Yet as these explorers filled in the blanks on their maps, they stumbled upon inconsistencies. James Clark Ross's charts of the coastline aligned suspiciously well with certain sections of the Piri Reis map, particularly around what we now call Queen Maud Land. When British surveyors in the early 20th century compared medieval Portolan charts to their own aerial surveys, they found stretches where the older maps deviated by less than half a degree of longitude, an accuracy that defied the navigational tools of the Renaissance, let alone antiquity. Modern technology has only deepened the mystery. Satellite radar and ice-penetrating sonar have revealed Antarctica's subglacial topography in stunning detail, exposing ancient river valleys and mountain ranges buried for millennia. When researchers superimposed these hidden features onto the Bewatch map of 1737, the overlap was uncanny. Bewatch's inland sea matched the location of the now subglacial Aurora Basin, a depression larger than France. His mountain ranges aligned with the Gambetsev Mountains, buried under 2 miles of ice and unknown until 1958. These aren't vague similarities, they're precise enough to rule out coincidence. Yet mainstream academia remains divided. Some argue that Bewatch simply made inspired guesses based on theoretical geography. Others point to his own notes where he cited ancient sources now lost to time. The most compelling counterargument comes from ice core data. Antarctica's glaciers have smothered its coastline for at least 6,000 years, meaning any pre-modern contact would require civilizations far older than recorded history. But here's the twist. Recent studies of sediment layers suggest occasional, brief warm periods when coastal ice may have retreated enough to expose slivers of land. Could a Bronze Age ship have glimpsed these temporary shores during a climatic anomaly? The idea isn't as far-fetched as it seems. The Minoans, masters of the Mediterranean, were sailing to Britain for tin as early as 2000 BC. The Harappans of the Indus Valley traded with Mesopotamia by sea. These cultures left no written records of southern voyages, but absence isn't negation. What's often overlooked is how knowledge survives. The Library of Alexandria burned, but fragments of its texts resurfaced centuries later in Baghdad and Constantinople. Polynesian star charts, once dismissed as myth, were rediscovered in the 1970s to contain precise navigational data. Antarctica's secrets may not lie in ice-bound ruins, but in overlooked manuscripts or misinterpreted artifacts. A Chinese porcelain shard found in the South Shetland Islands could be debris from an 18th century whaler, or evidence of Zheng He's lost ships. A Roman coin unearthed in Argentina fuels speculation about transatlantic contact. The line between fact and fringe isn't always clear. The real lesson of Antarctica's modern rediscovery isn't that earlier voyages were impossible, it's that history is a palimpsest, constantly rewritten. Every generation assumes theirs is the first to glimpse the truth, only to find footsteps in the snow they can't explain. Whether those footsteps belong to Phoenicians, Polynesians, or simply the human imagination, the ice refuses to say. And perhaps that's the most tantalizing possibility of all. Not that we've solved the mystery, but that the greatest chapters of exploration might still be waiting to be found. The allure of lost civilizations and forbidden knowledge has always been a magnet for our imagination, and nowhere is this more evident than in the flood of books and documentaries claiming to expose Antarctica's hidden history. From breathless narration about ancient alien bases to glossy reenactments of Phoenician ships battling Antarctic storms, these productions thrive on spectacle over substance. They often cherry-pick data highlighting a single anomalous map or artifact while ignoring the mountain of contradictory evidence to weave tales that feel more like adventure novels than scholarly inquiry. The problem isn't that these stories are entertaining, it's that they dress speculation in the trappings of academia, leaving audiences convinced they've glimpsed a suppressed truth. Take the infamous anomalous Antarctica genre. A typical episode might juxtapose aerial photos of ice formations with CGI recreations of Atlantean metropolises, all while a gravel-voiced narrator asks, could this prove everything we've been taught is wrong? The technique is straight from the pseudo-history playbook. Present a genuine mystery like the Bewatch map's odd accuracy, then pivot to wild conclusions without addressing simpler explanations. Scholars call this argument from ignorance, assuming something must be true simply because it hasn't been definitively disproven. By this logic, we might as well claim dragons built the pyramids because no one can prove they didn't. What's often missing is context. When a documentary shows the Piri Reis maps, Antarctica, alongside modern subglacial surveys, it rarely mentions that the same map places Japan in the Caribbean and stretches South America into a bizarre, elongated shape. Selective evidence feels persuasive until you see the full picture. Even reputable historians sometimes fall into this trap. The best-selling book Fingerprints of the Gods popularized the idea that Antarctica was home to an advanced prehistoric culture, citing myths and maps as proof. Yet its central thesis that a global civilization was wiped out 12,000 years ago contradicts archaeological consensus. Ice cores, sediment layers, and genetic studies show no evidence of a sophisticated society during that era. The book's enduring appeal lies not in its accuracy, but in its storytelling, the same reason we love epic myths about sunken continents. The real casualty of pseudo-history isn't just truth, it's the erasure of genuine human achievement. By attributing ancient exploration to aliens or hyper-advanced lost races, we rob our ancestors of their ingenuity. The Polynesians who navigated by starlight, the Phoenicians who braved the Atlantic, these were real people with real skills, not beneficiaries of forgotten technology. When a TV special claims the Piri Reis map could only have been made with aerial surveys, it ignores the sophistication of medieval Arab and Turkish cartography, which synthesized centuries of Greek, Persian, and Indian geographic knowledge. Spotting pseudoscience isn't about cynicism, it's about rigor. Credible research welcomes scrutiny, publishes methodology, and acknowledges gaps in evidence. Contrast that with the viral Ancient Antarctica YouTube videos that cite classified military documents or anonymous insiders as sources. Healthy skepticism asks, who funded this study? Has it been peer-reviewed? What do experts outside this niche think? When the History Channel's Ancient Aliens suggests Antarctic pyramids are alien landing pads, geologists point out these are Nunatak's natural rock formations shaped by millennia of wind erosion. The difference between mystery and myth often boils down to whether we're willing to accept mundane answers over sensational ones. This isn't to say all alternative theories lack merit. Graham Hancock's work, while controversial, at least engages with real archaeological debates about the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. The key is distinguishing between fringe ideas that challenge paradigms responsibly and those that ignore evidence outright. When a documentary claims archaeologists are hiding the truth about Antarctic ruins, consider this. If such a discovery existed, why would every scholar on Earth conspire to suppress it? Academia thrives on overturning orthodoxy. Finding a lost civilization would be a career-making breakthrough, not a threat. The fascination with Antarctica's secrets reveals something profound about us. We want the past to be grander, stranger, more mysterious than textbooks suggest. But the true wonder lies in what we can prove. That humans crossed oceans in hollowed-out logs, mapped continents without satellites, and passed down knowledge through generations with nothing but memory and song. These achievements are extraordinary enough without inventing Atlantis. The next time you see a headline about shocking Antarctic revelations, ask yourself, is this expanding our understanding of history or just selling a fantasy? Because the ice's greatest secret might be how little we still know about the very real, very human explorers who may or may not have glimpsed its shores. The frozen expanse of Antarctica holds more than just ice. It guards the potential to rewrite history itself. Imagine a future where sonar scans reveal the outline of a Phoenician merchant ship preserved in the deep. Its cargo hold still packed with amphorae of olive oil from Carthage. Or picture archaeologists chiseling through glacial layers to uncover a bronze navigational instrument, its star charts pointing to constellations only visible from the southern hemisphere. These aren't just fantasies, they're tangible possibilities waiting beneath the ice. The continent's brutal environment, while destructive, also acts as a time capsule. Organic materials that would rot elsewhere could lie frozen in perfect condition, like the 19th century whiskey bottles found under Shackleton's hut, still drinkable after a century. But the hunt for evidence isn't just about luck, it's about technology. Modern tools like ground-penetrating radar and autonomous underwater drones are revolutionizing polar archaeology. In 2022, researchers used thermal imaging to detect anomalies beneath Greenland's ice that turned out to be Viking-era hunting camps. Apply that same tech to Antarctica's lesser-explored coasts, and who knows what might surface. The Southern Ocean's depths are especially promising. Cold, low-oxygen water slows decay, leaving shipwrecks eerily intact. The discovery of Endurance in 2022 proved even century-old wooden ships can survive in these conditions. Now scale that back 2,000 years. A single preserved hull could reveal everything from construction techniques to trade goods, offering a snapshot of ancient global connections we never knew existed. Yet the absence of finds so far speaks volumes. Skeptics argue that if ancient civilizations had reached Antarctica, we'd have found anything by now. But consider this, less than 1% of the continent's coastline has been systematically surveyed for archaeology. Most expeditions focus on modern research stations or fossil beds, not potential human sites. Even when researchers do stumble upon anomalies like the so-called pyramid-shaped mountains in the Ellsworth Range, natural explanations usually suffice. The truth is, Antarctica's sheer size and hostility make it the ultimate needle in a haystack challenge. A shipwreck could lie buried under centuries of snowfall, invisible until a freak melt exposes it. The real breakthrough might come from indirect evidence. Take the humble louse. Scientists tracing human migration patterns have used lice DNA to confirm contact between Polynesians and South Americans centuries before Columbus. Similarly, sediment cores from Antarctic seabeds might one day reveal traces of ancient plant matter or pollen inconsistent with the region's ecology, hinting at human visitors who carried foreign seeds in their supplies. Even myths could guide us. When the Maori spoke of Uaitirangara's voyage to the frozen ocean, they described phenomena no tropical people could invent, like pancake ice, a formation unique to polar waters. If oral traditions from disparate cultures share uncanny details about southern lands, shouldn't we at least consider they're describing real places? The waiting game is agonizing. Every summer melt reveals new terrain, and every technological leap brings us closer to scanning previously inaccessible zones. But until that eureka moment, the mystery remains a Rorschach test. To some, the lack of artifacts proves ancient Antarctic contact is a pipe dream. To others, the silence is pregnant with possibility, a reminder that history's biggest discoveries often start as outliers dismissed by the establishment. Whether future finds vindicate the skeptics or the dreamers, one thing's certain: Antarctica isn't done surprising us. The ice keeps its secrets close, but not forever. And when it finally lets go, the story of human exploration may gain chapters we never dared to imagine. History has a way of humbling our certainty. Take the Vinland map, a faded parchment that sent shockwaves through academia when it surfaced in the 1950s. At first glance, it seemed to depict Norse settlements in North America centuries before Columbus, complete with Greenland's coastline and a mysterious land labeled Vinland. Skeptics called it a hoax, pointing to chemical traces in the ink. But then archaeologists dug at Elands Orks Meadows, uncovering Viking longhouses exactly where the map suggested. Overnight, a dismissed artifact became proof that medieval Europe knew of the New World long before history books claimed. The lesson: sometimes the most outrageous theories are just waiting for the right evidence to tip the scales. Then there's the Antikythera mechanism, a corroded bronze relic pulled from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck off the coast of Greece. For decades, scholars assumed it was an astrolabe or decorative gear. until X-ray imaging revealed its true nature. An intricate astronomical calculator capable of predicting eclipses and tracking planetary movements with precision that wouldn't be matched until the Renaissance. This wasn't just a curiosity, it rewrote our understanding of ancient Greek engineering, proving they'd mastered clockwork gears centuries before such technology was thought to exist. The device forces us to ask, how many other marvels have been lost to time, their purpose misunderstood because we lack the tools to see them clearly? These mysteries share a common thread with Antarctica's enigma. They remind us that the past isn't a static record but a living puzzle, constantly reshaped by new discoveries. Consider how long we laughed at Norse sagas describing Vinland, dismissing them as folklore until archaeology proved otherwise, or how the Antikythera mechanism sat in a museum drawer for 50 years before someone thought to X-ray it. What if our skepticism about ancient Antarctic contact is just another blind spot, waiting for its Elance Orcs Meadows moment? The parallels run deeper. Like the Vinland map, controversial charts like Piri Reises or Bewatches are often branded as forgeries or lucky guesses until corroborating evidence emerges. And like the Antikythera mechanism, their true significance might lie not in what they explicitly show, but in the gaps they force us to confront. Why would a Turkish admiral in 1513 draw a coastline matching Antarctica's subglacial topography? How did an 18th century French geographer sketch mountain ranges now confirmed under 2 miles of ice? Coincidence doesn't stretch that far. What these cases teach us is humility. For every impossible artifact proven genuine, there are dozens still shrouded in doubt. The Voynich manuscript's uncrackable code, the Baghdad battery's debated purpose, the Nazca Line's celestial alignments. These aren't just footnotes, they're cautionary tales against dismissing the unfamiliar. When experts once scoffed at Polynesians reaching South America, DNA from sweet potatoes proved them wrong. When they mocked the idea of Bronze Age tin traders crossing the Atlantic, shipwrecks off Devon's coast proved the trade existed. Antarctica's mystery sits at this crossroads between skepticism and wonder. It's easy to dismiss ancient maps as errors or myths until you remember how many myths turned out to be memories of real events. The Minoan eruption of Thera was long thought to inspire Plato's Atlantis tale until ash layers matched the timeline. Aboriginal stories of coastal flooding were considered allegories until geologists confirmed sea level rises 12,000 years ago. Oral traditions like maps are rarely pure fiction. They're echoes of something older, distorted but not invented. The real challenge isn't proving ancient sailors reached Antarctica, it's untangling why their potential voyages matter. These aren't just academic debates, they're windows into human resilience and curiosity. The Norse didn't sail to Vinland because it was easy, they went because the horizon called to them. The Greeks didn't build the Antikythera mechanism because they had to, but because they dared to imagine the cosmos as a machine. If even a single ship from antiquity glimpsed Antarctica's glaciers, it wouldn't just redraw maps, it would redefine what we thought our ancestors were capable of. That's the heart of history's greatest puzzles. They're not just about facts, but about us, how we interpret the past, and in doing so, reveal our own biases. Every time we uncover a Vinland map or an Antikythera mechanism, we're forced to admit the past was wider, stranger, and more daring than we assumed. Antarctica's enigma, whether ever solved or not, serves the same purpose. It keeps us questioning because the moment we stop, history stops with us. Technology has a way of turning yesterday's impossibilities into today's breakthroughs. Satellite imaging, once the exclusive domain of Cold War spy agencies, Now let's archaeologists scan entire continents from orbit, spotting buried ruins invisible to the naked eye. In Egypt's arid deserts, infrared sensors have revealed hidden chambers beneath the pyramids by detecting subtle temperature differences in the stone. Apply that same tech to Antarctica's ice sheets, and suddenly, the idea of finding traces of ancient human activity doesn't seem so far-fetched. The European Space Agency's Cryosat satellite, designed to measure ice thickness, could inadvertently map submerged coastlines where ships might have anchored during warmer periods. Even now, algorithms trained to recognize shipwrecks in the Mediterranean are being adapted to scour Antarctic seabed scans for unnatural shapes. A wooden hull preserved in the icy depths, perhaps, or stone tools encased in millennia-old sediment. Underwater archaeology is undergoing its own revolution. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROV, can now dive thousands of feet below the Southern Ocean's surface, equipped with sonar that paints 3D images of the seafloor in stunning detail. These aren't the clunky machines of decades past. Today's models carry laser scanners that can detect tool marks on a sunken amphora or trace the grain of wood in a ship's beam. When the research vessel S.A. Agulhas Roman II mapped the wreck of Shackleton's Endurance in 2022, it proved something remarkable. Even a century under crushing ice and relentless currents hadn't erased the ship's structure. Now imagine what could survive 2,000 years in the colder, less oxygen-rich waters near Antarctica, where decay slows to a crawl. A Phoenician trading vessel, if one exists down there, might be frozen in time, its cargo hold still packed with goods meant for a port no one ever reached. Climate science is filling in gaps we didn't even know existed. Ice cores drilled from Antarctica's glaciers act like tree rings for the planet, preserving snapshots of Earth's atmosphere going back 800,000 years. By analyzing trapped air bubbles and volcanic ash layers, researchers can pinpoint periods when the continent's edges might have been accessible. The mid-Holocene warm spell around 6,000 years ago, for instance, saw summer temperatures along the peninsula rise enough to expose patches of bare ground. Could a ship have landed there, leaving behind campfires or tools now buried under meters of ice? New modeling techniques track ancient ocean currents with eerie precision, revealing how a vessel blown off course might have been swept southward by the Antarctic circumpolar current, a watery conveyor belt with no easy exit. Yet for all these tools, the biggest obstacle remains Antarctica itself. Radar struggles to penetrate ice thicker than a mile, and even the most advanced drones can't survey the entire continent's coastline, much less its submerged shelves. The solution might lie in collaboration. Citizen science projects like NASA Ice Bridge let amateur researchers scour satellite images for anomalies, while open-source databases pool findings from disparate fields. A glaciologist's ice core data could cross-reference with an archaeologist's study of ancient trade routes, revealing patterns no single discipline would spot alone. The recent discovery of Norse settlements in Newfoundland didn't come from a lone genius with a map. It took decades of interdisciplinary work, from analyzing sagas to radiocarbon dating nails. The irony is delicious. The same technologies that debunked many Antarctic myths, carbon dating, spectrography, deep-sea sonar, are now the very tools that might confirm others. Take the controversial claim that Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis had access to ancient Antarctic maps. For years, skeptics argued his chart's southern landmass was a distorted South America. But in 2018, a team using AI-assisted cartographic analysis found something startling. When accounting for common medieval projection errors, sections of the map aligned with Antarctica's subglacial topography within a margin of error of just 2%. That doesn't prove ancient contact, but it raises questions no one thought to ask before machine learning entered the picture. What makes this mystery so enduring isn't just the lack of answers, it's the way each technological leap peels back another layer of possibility. The Vinland map was dismissed until Eland's Ox Meadows proved the Norse crossed the Atlantic. The Antikythera mechanism was labeled a hoax until X-rays revealed its gears. Antarctica's secrets may follow the same arc, not with a sudden bombshell, but through painstaking increments: a pollen grain in an ice core, a sonar blip on the ocean floor, a line of code that finally deciphers an old map's riddles. Until then, the continent remains history's ultimate cold case, daring us to keep digging. At its core, the question of ancient Antarctic exploration isn't just about maps or shipwrecks, it's a mirror held up to our own understanding of human potential. We've been taught to view history as a linear march of progress, where each era builds on the last with increasing sophistication. But what if the timeline isn't so neat? The idea that Bronze Age sailors might have glimpsed Antarctica forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our ancestors were far more capable than modern textbooks give them credit for. Take the Polynesian navigators who crossed the Pacific without compasses, or the Phoenician traders who circumnavigated Africa centuries before Vasco da Gama. These weren't primitive people stumbling blindly across the waves. They were masterful observers of nature, reading currents and stars with a precision we're only now beginning to appreciate. This debate also exposes the fragility of knowledge itself. The Library of Alexandria burned, taking with it countless works of ancient science and geography. Inca quippus were destroyed by conquistadors who dismissed them as pagan artifacts. How much maritime wisdom vanished with them? Consider the case of the Greek astronomer Hipparchus, whose star catalogue, the first known attempt to map the night sky, survives only in fragments. If entire libraries can turn to ash, is it so unlikely that records of southern voyages were lost too? Antarctica's silence isn't necessarily proof of absence. It might just reflect how brutally history filters what gets preserved. There's a deeper philosophical shift at stake here as well. For centuries, Western academia framed exploration as a European achievement: Columbus, Magellan, Cook. But if earlier civilizations reached Antarctica, even fleetingly, it upends that narrative. Suddenly, exploration becomes a global human impulse, not the exclusive domain of one culture or era. The Polynesians didn't need the Enlightenment to cross oceans. The Phoenicians didn't wait for the age of discovery to trade across continents. Recognizing these feats isn't revisionism, it's giving credit where it's long been overdue. This mystery also challenges our assumptions about technology. We tend to equate innovation with complexity: steel over wood, engines over sails. Yet some of history's greatest voyages were made with simple tools: Viking sunstones that polarized light to locate the sun on cloudy days, or Polynesian stick charts that encoded wave patterns as navigational aids. These weren't crude inventions, they were elegant solutions honed through generations of observation. Antarctica's harsh environment might have demanded equally creative adaptations: seal blubber insulation, ice-resistant hull designs that left no archaeological trace. The absence of such artifacts doesn't prove they never existed. It just means the ice hasn't yielded them yet. Most importantly, this discussion reminds us that history is never truly settled. Every few years, a new discovery like the Roman-era shipwrecks found off Brazil or the Norse settlements unearthed in Canada forces us to redraw the maps of human movement. Antarctica represents the last great blank space on that map, a continent where every potential clue is locked under miles of ice. But as glaciers retreat and technology advances, who knows what might emerge? The past has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Ultimately, The significance of this mystery lies in what it reveals about curiosity itself. Humans have always pushed boundaries, whether chasing the horizon or the stars. The possibility that ancient sailors might have ventured south isn't just a historical footnote, it's a testament to the restless spirit that defines us. Whether the evidence ultimately proves or disproves their voyages, the conversation alone expands our imagination of what's possible. And in that expansion, we honor not just the explorers who might have been, but the ones still to come. What if history's greatest voyages weren't the ones we've recorded, but the ones we've forgotten? The question of ancient Antarctic exploration isn't just about maps and shipwrecks. It's about how we measure human courage against the unknown. Think of the Polynesian navigators who set sail knowing they might never find land, or the Phoenician traders who ventured beyond the Pillars of Hercules into waters no one had charted. These weren't reckless adventurers, they were calculated risk-takers pushing boundaries with the tools they had. So when we ask whether someone, millennia ago, might have glimpsed Antarctica's icy shores, we're really asking, how much of our past remains hidden in the gaps between what we know and what we dare to imagine? Now it's your turn. Do you see the Piri Reis map as a smoking gun, a fragment of lost knowledge hinting at voyages we've overlooked? Or is it simply a case of medieval cartographers connecting dots that weren't there? Maybe you're drawn to the oral traditions, the Maori legends of frozen seas, or the Greek tales of Pythias's slush-filled ocean. Could these stories be distorted memories of real encounters with southern ice? Or are they just poetic descriptions of closer, colder lands like Patagonia or Iceland? There's no single answer here, and that's what makes this mystery so thrilling. But let's play devil's advocate for a moment. If ancient sailors had reached Antarctica, where's the hard evidence? No ship timbers, no campsites, no tools buried in the permafrost. Skeptics argue that absence speaks volumes, that without physical proof, these theories remain just stories. Yet history is full of discoveries that defied expectations. The city of Troy was once considered a myth until Schliemann dug it up. The Viking settlement at Eland's Ox Meadows rewrote the narrative of transatlantic exploration overnight. Could Antarctica be waiting for its own eureka, a moment, or are we chasing shadows? Here's another angle. Even if no ancient ship ever landed on Antarctica, does it matter that they might have tried? Human history is littered with near misses and almost discoveries. A storm-blown Phoenician galley, a Ming junk carried south by rogue currents. These voyages wouldn't need to reach shore to leave their mark. A single surviving account passed down through generations could have seeded the myths and maps that puzzle us today. The line between exploration and legend has always been thinner than we think. So where do you stand? Are the whispers of ancient Antarctic contact a trail worth following, or a dead end dressed up in mystery? Drop your thoughts below. Whether your team lost civilization or team coincidence, this debate is far from over. And who knows, maybe the next big clue is already out there, waiting for someone to connect the dots. After all, history's greatest secrets rarely stay buried forever. The question of ancient ships reaching Antarctica lingers like fog on the horizon, just substantial enough to hint at unseen contours, yet too faint to grasp completely. This isn't just a debate about maps or artifacts. It's a window into how we reconstruct lost chapters of human ambition. For every tantalizing clue, the Piri Reis maps uncanny contours, Polynesian legends of frozen seas. There's an equally plausible counterargument. Maybe these fragments are red herrings distorted by time and translation, or perhaps they're breadcrumbs left by cultures whose full stories we'll never recover. The truth might lie somewhere in between, not a definitive voyage, but a mosaic of near misses, whispered rumors, and fleeting encounters that slipped through history's cracks. What makes this mystery endure isn't just the lack of answers, it's the way it challenges our assumptions about the past. We're so accustomed to viewing exploration as a linear march of progress that the idea of pre-modern Antarctic contact feels jarring, almost heretical. Yet history constantly reminds us that civilizations rose and fell long before our records began. The Minoans traded tin across the Mediterranean while Stonehenge was still being built. The Polynesians crossed oceans in canoes while Europe languished in the Dark Ages. Given these leaps of ingenuity, why couldn't someone have ventured south? The absence of proof isn't proof of absence. It's an invitation to look harder. Consider how many breakthroughs began as dismissed theories. Heinrich Schliemann was ridiculed for hunting Troy until he dug up its walls. Thor Heyerdahl's Kon-Tiki raft was called a suicide mission until it proved bamboo vessels could cross the Pacific. Antarctica's secrets may follow the same arc, not with a single eureka moment, but through patient accumulation of clues. A pollen grain in an ice core tracing back to South America. A ship's timber carbon dated to the Bronze Age. Even the lack of evidence tells a story. If ancient sailors did reach the ice, their traces might lie submerged under millennia of glacial melt, waiting for technology to catch up. At its heart, this mystery is about more than geography. It's about the human spirit. The same curiosity that sent Phoenicians beyond the Pillars of Hercules or Polynesians into the Pacific's void still drives us today. Whether ancient ships touched Antarctic ice or not, the very idea sparks something primal, the thrill of the undiscovered, the sense that history's pages aren't fully written. And that's why we keep searching, not just for answers, but for the reminder that our world still holds whispers of the extraordinary. Thanks for sailing into these uncharted waters with us. If you're hungry for more historical puzzles, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty of enigmas left to explore. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and never stop chasing the horizon.